From the Aishin Broadcast Studio, it's the Executive Spotlight.
Welcome to the Auto Success Executive Spotlight. I'm your host, Brian Ankney. Today, my guest is Jon Lamb from Coverage in a Click. Welcome, Jon.
Thank you.
Let's get started with a little bit about you. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and the career path that led you to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. I actually got started like most people do in this business, of selling cars. My very first job was selling Hondas for a group. It was called AutoWay, which is now AutoNation. Did that for a couple years, partnered up with a dealer that I had met at the auctions, started an independent car lot. Really about the time when online retailing was just coming into fruition. This is when Auto Trader was still coming around as a magazine. So really embraced the internet, and then we had our first slowdown of my career, and we shut down the lot, and I went to work for a company called Cobalt. And then from Cobalt, we were consulting with OEMs, primarily Infiniti and Nissan dealers. And from there, got back into retail from an existing client relationship, ran a large group that was based in Atlanta, and from there went to go work on the advertising side, been there pretty much ever since. Ran a company called More & Scary, which is one of the largest advertising agencies in the country at the time. It's now called Affinity. It's been acquired. Did that for a couple of years. I worked for Grant Cardone. Everyone knows Grant Cardone. And then most recently, I was the CEO of a finance company. We did used car leasing. And today I'm here to talk a little bit about our first service product, my first foray into service, actually.
Cool. You've had a lot of your career has moved around in the advertising space and marketing space for dealerships. Can you, why do you think it is that there's such a disparity between the amount of focus that goes on to marketing the front end of the dealership, sales, versus the back end of the dealership, service and fixed ops?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with, vendors chase the budget, right? There's a larger budget in the front, and there's obviously co-op, which offsets some of the expense of advertising for dealers. And it's, dealers still believe, and I think most people believe, you have to sell cars to stay in business, right? It's units in operation. It makes sense. You have to retail cars. And I actually think that because the budget's there's more focus there's more technology there. And it's an easier part of the business to understand. It might not sound the best when people hear me say that out loud, but, fixed is difficult. Variable, you kind of stock the cars, and I get there's more to it than just stocking cars and merchandising. But, fixed is a different animal. And they have different budgets, obviously, and they have different objectives, and it's just more intricate. So I think people focus on the front where it's like, hey, I'm going to get a good price. It's easy to retail the car. It's easy to do the digital advertising. Everything's geared for it. So when you start to talk to dealerships about, hey, let's go back and market for service, there's still a lot of traditional approach to that versus a digital approach. And I just think vendors chase the budget, and people who work in dealerships feel more comfortable with variable because that's where they came up from. And everything that they've learned about advertising is skewed to variable. So I think that's what causes it. And it's been like that way forever. So I kind of was telling you in your office, I probably know 1,000 general managers, 100 dealers. I know 2 or 3 service directors. Yeah. And I've been at this over 20 years. Just lately with this marketplace that we launched, how we got ingrained in service. And quite frankly, it took us a year to build the app itself, the marketplace. But it took me 3 solid months of sitting in service departments to try to figure out, how do we make it better? Yeah. How do we sell things on the drop? How are they doing it now? What's broken? What's not broken? And make it better. And I think a lot of people who are in advertising, they don't have the time or they don't have the knowledge to go back into service and learn it before they start marketing for it or even building technology for it.
Yeah, as a customer that buys a car, you look at a dealership as one unit, but it's, like you said, it's really unfortunate that the service department and the sales department are so separated. Have you ever been to a dealership or worked with a dealership where the service manager and the sales manager or general sales manager planned their marketing together?
As a client, no. I've been in retail meetings before, like manager meetings, obviously, where the 2 of them are in there and going over some ideas that they're throwing off of each other. But from an agency standpoint and as a consultant standpoint, you never rarely ever engage with anyone from service. And if it was something that was, predetermined or finite, like, hey, I need to get more quick lube business. Like, what are your thoughts? But there's not a joint effort there by any means, in my opinion, that I haven't seen.
I want to shift gears for a minute. I mean, interest rates, the economy, there's a million reasons. We don't need to go over those, but dealerships are looking for new ways to add incremental revenue. Like what opportunities do you see out there for dealerships to add incremental revenue without a huge capital expenditure?
Yeah, in my opinion, there's two still untouched. One is finance. We talked about that earlier, and I think there's some people doing some incredible things in the F&I departments. And the other is basically getting service. I mean, I think service departments, for the most part, are incredibly efficient versus the past. There's a lot of technology that assists the service director and anyone else in service to run the department very efficiently. But what service lacks is just taking the digitization that Variable's gone through. There's ways to digitize service and take it out and try to scale it up, especially like from the service drive perspective. And I think that's one of the last untouched places. And then, of course, F&I. I mean, we're seeing embedded insurance. People are really kind of branching out. Some of the more aggressive dealers are forming leasing companies or acting as a captive. And since we've launched this product, we're getting out into service. It's welcomed. I've gotten pushback on a lot of products that I've either built myself or represented in the past. And I'm not really up doing that. I already have somebody doing that. But when you start to go back in service and you sit down with the service director and say, hey, we're going to digitize this process, but you don't have to change anything. You just have to join a marketplace. You have to think about like, hey, I need to get these customers online where they are. Service directors, they really welcome that because they don't have time to change their processes. Like we talked about, they're incredibly busy. They're not going to sit down and go over an AdWords campaign with someone.
Yeah,
they're just not geared that way, right? So you have to build things that cater specifically to them and that make sense to them. And if you do so, then services are really an untapped segment of the store, right? The business unit itself really needs a lot of help from a digital transformation standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Well, like on your marketplace, in the service department, what are they selling? I mean, what are they selling?
Well, you can sell everything on a marketplace. Primarily what we're selling now are F&I products and also and services, just like in the F&I office. So you do have some customers who will purchase a vehicle service contract off the drive. Mm-hmm. But primarily, I think what a lot of people our experience have been is it's ancillary products. So it's the key replacement product. It's a battery replacement product, tire and wheel. Prepaid maintenance is another one that does very well in there. And anything that I would say anything that a customer thinks of that they've either just recently replaced or recently repaired, and the cost of it took them back for a second. Mm-hmm. As we were talking earlier, changing a battery is not like it used to be. It's quite expensive on a lot of these models. You'd be surprised. We see the tickets come in on a battery replacement, and some of them $500-600 and 4 hours in the shop. And keys are not like they used to be. Keys are $400 or $500, And the customer's mind, he's still thinking, hey, if I'm going to go buy a key from the dealership, I'm just going to rock back there real quick and they're going to hand me one. We know that's not the case anymore. They got to be programmed. And when they see the sticker shock, they think to themselves, I wish I would have had some sort of protection product or a replacement product, when I bought the car. But overwhelmingly, the majority of customers do not buy products when they're in F&I. A good dealership, maybe 30, 40, maybe 45% penetration on ancillaries and vehicle service contracts. So there's a lot of untapped opportunities that are back in the service drive every day. And in addition to that, the overwhelming majority of the customers that are in your service department they're conquest customers as well. They didn't buy the car from you. So you don't know what protection products if they have any at all. So there's a lot of opportunity to offer up products at point of sale.
Presented from the Ishin Broadcast Studio at Babcock's Media.
Interesting. So you can sell them anything on the marketplace. I mean, it's every product you sell in F&I, mm-hmm. But from service contract through maintenance, through keys and tires and everything else. What about like parts or accessories or clothing? All the things that are sold in the parts department lobby. Are those things available on there too?
We could certainly put them on there, but I think what what our marketplace is geared towards is selling products when the customer comes in for service, right? So they just replaced an item, and they, like I said, the sticker shock hits them, and they're like, oh, for $99 a month, I can have prepaid maintenance on my car, or whatever it might be, if they choose to finance. I think that's what has the most success. We have one dealer who has accessories on there, aftermarket like accessories, but we haven't had anybody ask to put parts on there.
Okay.
I think parts is more of a wholesale website or a wholesale marketplace. I think that'd be better for parts. But our app specifically is designed for the mobile first customer, right? We want them to be able to buy in a digital environment just like they buy everything else. Like you can buy a protection product for your car in under 2 minutes, use all your digital wallets, store it on your phone. That's not something that you're going to do for a part. And everything is based upon VIN. So like parts and parts catalogs incredibly complicated to render online.
I gotcha. Well, and I guess the opportunity exists greater. I mean, the person's pain point is because they just had a massive repair or a key replacement, and those products tend to be much more profitable too. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a good. If you're a service department, it's a good way to do. It's accretive revenue. I mean, it really is. And there's not the capex that you talked about. Like, hey, how can I drive revenue from what I'm doing currently, my footprint? Well, the only way you're going to do that is to either bring more people in, obviously, but that's costly, or you have to maximize every interaction with the customer. But you have to do it in a way that's systemic to what you're already have in place at the service department. If you go to a service department and you say, hey, go and change all your F&I products and go from protective to assurant, it's never going to happen, right? The service director doesn't have time to convince the general manager, and there's a deeper connection between product provider and then the dealer than most people realize, right? So you have to build something that's going to work with their products. Most service directors have a really defined process, and they believe in their process, and they enforce their process. So if you ask them to change their process, you're not going to get any traction. Yeah. So whatever you build, it needs to be systemic. It has to be their products, and you have to make sure that their understanding is they're still their customers. So there's a lot of people who try to work with service departments and sell things post-transaction or post-service visit, but they're really high touch. A lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, and we've all heard that, hey, I'm trying to contact you about your customer, your extended warranty for your car and things like that. It's a joke now, but a lot of dealers are apprehensive about a third party contacting their customers, even if it's on behalf of the dealership, because they're not quite sure what that experience is going to be. Is it going to be consistent every time? Yeah. Are the customers ever going to engage? So what we built was, hey, low friction, pass it to the customer, QR code, as we talked about. Customer scans it and they go and buy whatever they want, whenever they feel like they need something. And that's really what customers are looking for in service. If you try to take a service advisor and turn them into a salesman, you're going to fail. If you try to get them to integrate into their technology stack, it's never going to get any traction. It's going to die off. You'll have tremendous success for a week. So you have to build it where it's systemic to what they're doing and the customer is in control of the process. That's where you get the most success that we found from the service drive.
Well, now, how do you introduce the customer to the QR code? You mentioned that all they have to do is scan a QR code and they're there. Where do you introduce them to that?
Well, you have point of sale material and all over the service lobby, like when they're waiting by the TV, table toppers, things like that. So we have some people who use like a pull up to talk about the marketplace with a huge QR code. They can just simply scan it. Overwhelming majority of our customers now are using either a sticker or they have pre-printed the QR codes and they're stapling to the RO. When they hand it, when they go to the cashier, swipe the card, they have it there. Don't forget that battery you just bought might have a lifetime warranty on it. Scan the QR code and take a look and see if there's anything that you like. But it's really that casual. Some people don't really say anything. They just staple the QR code and say, hey, a lot of the services that we offer here, you can buy online. And that's the whole end of the discussion. Mm-hmm. The customers are inquisitive anyways. So they're gonna scan and try to see what's on there, especially if they just had the repair. So when you think about that, it's when you're coming in for a car and you're buying an F&I product, by the time you get into the F&I department, you're either taxed, you're a little tired, or your guard's up, right? It's like people say, don't buy anything when you go to the next location. Like you've been conditioned to that. Or you're just exhausted, right? It's taken so long, unfortunately, and that could be the case. But when you're back there at service, you don't need to be prompted to scan a QR code. We're not trying to change that process or get the customer to think, okay, this is another opportunity they're just going to try to upsell me. It's actually something that's beneficial to the customer. When you create value on both sides, those are the best transactions, right? You got to create dual value creation is the key to prosperity, right? So when the customer thinks that they're getting something they're really good and it's at an affordable price and it's easy to do, dealership wins, customer wins.
I've heard you talk a lot about network effect. Does that exist in a dealership space?
Well, network effects are they're complicated but they're simple. Like their simplicity is their allure. But every exponential organization has a network effect. Dealerships, with the amount of revenue that we push through, you would think that they would be able to achieve a network effect. But unfortunately, it's not that way. And the reason is because of the purchasing cycle. But what I try to instill in dealers is the components of a network, like the flywheels of revenue, are things that you really need to focus on. And those are like inventory. Inventory is options. Options is customers is sales. It's a flywheel. It goes around. Same thing in service, right? So you have a service drive, you have the facility, you have the customer to come in, you have the repair, you have the RO. So but what we really kind of lack in service is the options. What's the optionality? What's the additional things that we can push through the pipe to drive more revenue? Customer comes in, they do a repair, you show them a price, they pay for it, they're on their way. There's usually not additional services that are offered at that time. And that's what we mean by scaling up your revenue, taking your existing process and then just adding other revenue touch points throughout that. And that's why we built the marketplace. And that's why I think I'm focused so much on network effects. If you really start to think about, am I getting everything that I can from my store? Overwhelmingly, the people will tell you yes, but then you change one or two processes and the next thing you know, you have a 10% revenue increase. Like that's what I mean by network effects and starting using those principles and start about scaling your existing business. And you do that. The only way to do that as a dealer is to go, heavy into the digital experience, and marketplaces fit that.
Well, Jon, thank you for coming in today. Is there anything more you'd like to share with our audience?
No, I just really appreciate you having me in, and I love what you're doing for the industry. Give smaller vendors like myself a chance to speak and reach bigger audiences. I really appreciate it.
Well, all of the larger vendors in the space were smaller vendors at some time. So
yep, that's
you're on
true.
your way.
Yep, good point.
Thanks for coming. And thank you for taking the time to join us for this Auto Success Executive Spotlight. I'm your host, Brian Ankney. Today, my guest has been Jon Lamb from Coverage in a Click. We hope to see you again on a future episode. This one's Over the Curb and Burning Gas.